on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the hard knock life, but not the chica kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share their interests together with a similar kind. When they said John Glover for Spider-Man, they didn't mind. The activists, directors, comments and the lectures, fanboys, professional artists and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC. In full color, you see me. The hard knock life. Comics, movies, and TV. Yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.
It's episode 7, Hard Knock Life. I am your host, Keith Chow. Welcome back. It's Walker Week, so we're going to talk about zombies tonight, and I got a great panel set up. People who love The Walking Dead and other sundry rotting corpses. Because it's Walker Week, I wanted to talk about the return of The Walking Dead television series, the anniversary of The Walking Dead comic book, and just zombies in general and why zombies are such a big part of the pop culture zeitgeist. So who I brought along to talk about this show tonight are some regulars and a very special guest. So let's get into the regulars first. She's hailing from Jersey. You know her from all of her extensive appearances on Hard Knock Life. She is Blazing Bitch at Twitter. It's N'Jaila Rhee. Welcome back, N'Jaila.
Thank you. I'm feeling good. Good talk about the dead rising.
You ready to talk about the living dead and rotting flesh and all those wonderful things? You know, it's Halloween, so do you have a preference when it comes to things that scare you around this time of year?
Halloween stuff generally does not scare me. Things that scare me are like student loans, cops.
Yeah. The typical stuff. Yeah. Our next panelist is another regular of the Hard Knock Life. He is now he's in Brooklyn. He was in DC last time he was on the show, but he's also another frequent viewer of The Walking Dead and reader of The Walking Dead comics. He's also you know him as my brother Raymond. Welcome back to Hard Knock Life, Raymond.
Hi, everybody.
So you have mixed feelings about The Walking Dead. What do you like about the comic and/or television show?
Well, I think that like it's the first time that like in a while where you do zombies and it's fun again. Like reading the comic was really, it was a different experience from, especially for me because I grew up, you know, pretty much staying in the superhero realm, and I never really touched a lot of the horror genre. So like that stuff. To start reading The Walking Dead was something different, and it was a fun ride.
Our last guest is a very special guest, and we kind of buried the lead a little bit because it's actually really an honor to have him on the show. You know him. There is no introduction. He is the angry Asian man himself. Welcome, Phil Yu, to Hard Knock Life.
What's up? Hello.
There he is.
Hello.
Phil Yu, welcome to Hard Knock Life. So, do you consider yourself a zombie aficionado?
Oh, absolutely not. Actually, not at all. I mean, the closest. I mean, before The Walking Dead, the closest thing I think I really liked in the zombie genre, or was even interested in, was probably 28 Days Later, and that's not a real, like, that's not a true zombie movie, but I think it's a realistic take on that, and that scared the bejesus out of me. So, yeah, and then reading The Walking Dead and getting to that was kind of a nice way to sort of slide into that as appreciated. I still don't think I actually like zombie genre, but I do enjoy, you know, The Walking Dead as a franchise and as a fiction.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, and I'm actually with you. You know, full disclosure, I am the one hosting, and this is my idea to do a Walking Dead show and the Walker Week on Nerds of Color, but full disclosure, I don't like zombies either, and before The Walking Dead, I stayed very far away from zombie material altogether. In fact, when I was a child, Michael Jackson's Thriller alone scared the bejesus out of me, and I couldn't even listen to the song when I was 6 years old. My cousin would play it on his little boombox, and I would literally run out of the room when he wouldn't turn it off. And when it got to the Vincent Price parts, forget about it. I was gone. By the time Vincent Price started rapping about the funk of 40,000 years, I was quivering like a baby under the blankets. So Yeah, and so zombies for me have always been like a bridge too far. I don't know why. I think I just didn't like the idea of dead people rising from the grave. But like Phil, because of The Walking Dead, that's the first zombie property that really kind of helped me ease into it. So I want to ask you first, N'Jaila, why do you think that what is it about The Walking Dead that can get people like me and Phil, who are not particularly zombie fans, interested in that as a storytelling device?
Well, I think it's kind of like how Cloverfield was a monster movie for people who didn't particularly like monster movies.
Mm.
It gives another take on what it would be like, because zombies are not the focal point. They're like scenery, deadly scenery, but scenery that helps set up a story about these characters. So I think really The Walking Dead is more than just survival, but it's about living in a crazy new world and how these characters cope with it. And I think that is something that people that are used to the zombie genre being, stay in a mall, blow off heads, gratuitous violence and or sex, I think it appeals to a different audience. So I think it draws people like you in who never really cared about it, because now you're getting this kind of cool character story, or cooler than most zombie stories.
Yeah, and that's actually a point that Jen writes about on Nerds of Color this week, when she talks about how it's because of Robert Kirkman and the way he takes the Walking Dead story, like you said, N'Jaila, where it's about the characters more so than the gore or the violence, that he really reinvigorated the genre. But Raymond, I thought that was a very provocative point, because she kind of dismisses George Romero and like Dawn of the Dead, and Night of the Living Dead, but at least in pop culture history, a lot of people put a lot of weight on, say, like Dawn of the Dead as Romero's kind of screed against consumerism. Why do you think, Raymond, zombies have this kind of you can project whatever you want on? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a monster, scary story about dead people who walk and want to eat brains. Why do we as pop culture junkies place so much meaning onto that?
Well, I think that it's a cultural safe zone, in a sense, that if you can't make the bad guys they're bad guys because they're part of some particular ethnic group or tribe, or they're some sort of secret agent. If they're just the enemy is death, then that's something that's easily relatable to, and there is no kind of you're not worried about stepping on any toes. There's never going to be a zombie lobby that could be upset, and so it's always kind of safe and everyone can get behind. Oh, let's be scared of zombies.
Right, but so when we have like the point we are in pop culture now, where it seems like, I mean, The Walking Dead returned last weekend on Sunday on AMC, and the ratings were like phenomenal. 16 million people watching a basic cable channel. I mean, Breaking Bad a couple weeks ago had 10 million viewers, and that was for the series finale, which was like this big deal. Walking Dead comes back for just a season premiere, blows all of the ratings out of the water. So Phil, let me ask you, as someone who is kind of steeped in pop culture as well, you're as much of a pop culture junkie as any of us on the panel. Do you feel like, I mean, now you can turn on the television and there are Sprint commercials with zombies in it. Do you feel like zombies have kind of jumped the shark, or are we at peak zombie? World War Z was a big hit over the summer. Where are we in terms of like zombie saturation?
I mean, I think, as the storytelling tool, as a genre, like I think we've kind of hit mainstream for sure, but I don't think it's quite hit that same place where people were like, oh, I remember when everyone was really tired of vampires, like. Right. So I think we're kind of in a place where like I find it so crazy that the highest rated TV show is like a basic cable horror show,
Yeah.
But I think it's a credit to like they're actually using the zombies, the walkers, to present a challenge, but it's really about how these characters deal with on top of zombies, I think post-apocalyptic fiction is also very hot right now. So that's probably another side of it too.
Right, and I mean, the comic was always a big hit as a comic book, but I think, the combination of the comic and now the television show as this, this pop culture phenomenon has kind of combined to create where zombies are everywhere. And I think that's also it's a blessing and a curse, because like I can imagine like 6-year-old me, if a 6-year-old me lived today, I couldn't even watch Thriller, right? I don't know that I could watch television and then like a zombie pops up on my Sprint commercial. I would be scared out of my mind. But I don't know, maybe we've gotten to the point where like, because they're so ingrained into the culture, like they're not as scary anymore.
Let me just say, I will say this. The first season of The Walking Dead, like, it totally grossed me out. I mean, like, the zombie kills were, like, really gruesome. The second episode has them just, like, busting entrails and putting it all over their body and stuff like that. And, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so gross. I will say, by the third season, and now by the fourth season, I felt like I was actually kind of desensitized a little bit to the gore and the violence, you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't think anything of just, like, seeing, like, somebody taking a boot to stomp a zombie head and just like, oh, okay, like.
Right.
I do feel like a little bit desensitized to it.
No, I'm actually right there with you, because I feel the same way. Like I said, I was always stayed away from zombie genres, and part of that is I think because I didn't really like the gore that much. I mean, the Fung Brothers just came out with a video today about why they don't like scary movies, and I understand. I understood every part of that video, because I feel the same way. I don't need to see like people getting cut open and stuff, and I agree with you, Phil, that over the series I've kind of become desensitized too, where I don't even like turn my head. I'm just like, oh, guy's getting his skull peeled back. Okay, whatever. I hope D'Angelo Barksdale survives. You know what I mean? Like there's no, I no longer like have that sense of gross out either. So, but Raymond, I wanted to ask you though. Do you think that, now that we have like zombie romantic comedies, like Warm Bodies and zombies selling cell phones, do you feel like zombies are less scary today than they were like 5 years ago?
So I think I just want to address the desensitization point first. I think that like part of it is also we've come to care less and less about. Like we don't care about the gruesomeness because we realize these aren't people, and so we're detached from like having to worry about that. That first episode when things are blowing up and organs are falling out, it's like, oh, that person was a human being, and it's totally not anymore. But now it's like, well, they're not dead, so we don't have an emotional connection to it. So it's literally mindless violence, and that's why we can kind of process it that way. So because I think like then when you have like stuff happening to Lori, that's still kind of gross and still kind of
difficult
you can
to watch
if you care about Lori, and some people
and
some
most
people
fans
don't.
didn't.
Yeah. But as to your second question, I thought zombies would have been played out by now, but I keep getting proved wrong. It keeps being successful, so I have no idea when the end of the zombie train is going to be. I think I'm waiting for Chinese zombies to make a big comeback in Asia and have some hopping ghosts jumping around. That's what I'm waiting for.
Well, it may be, right? It's funny. Another point that was on the Nerds of Color is actually, I'm glad you're on here, Phil, because it was an essay that Val Fee wrote for your website a few years ago, and it's this notion, like, like World War Z, the book and the film. Although I haven't seen the film, like, they both posit that the zombie apocalypse begins in Asia, and he equates like the idea that post-apocalyptic fiction always tends to reflect the white male power fantasies of other fictions, and that you never see people of color participate in those stories. And one of the reasons that Walking Dead appeals to us in particular, and especially for you, I mean, as someone who's interviewed Steve Yeun on your podcast, the fact that you have a character like Glenn who was not only a prominent character, but at least on the television show has become one of the main characters, if not the heart of the entire series. Do you think that that's one of the other appeals of The Walking Dead, is that you have a seemingly multicultural cast and Asian American characters in particular, Asian American male characters in particular, placed in roles that heretofore have never been seen before?
I mean, for me, yes, like unabashedly, yes. I mean, I don't even know if I would have given The Walking Dead a first look if I hadn't been tipped off that there was a relatively significant Asian American character in it, who, much to my joy, has grown and become like a really interesting character over time, especially when, given life by Stephen Yeun on the show, like. Definitely, I love seeing sort of that dynamic where he's part of the group, and I mean, as fans, and also really love him too. He's probably one of the fan favorites of the show, and also they don't really play up his race all that much. I mean, they touch upon it, and that's always kind of nice, but that's definitely not a significant part of his character and the way it plays out. I mean, like everybody's just kind of just trying to survive, so.
Right.
That's always been a really awesome thing for me to see. It adds to my joy of watching the show.
Well, and I think go ahead, Ray.
Well, and it's great that he's the normal guy, because like although Rick is the protagonist, he's crazy. So we don't really relate to we don't relate to him, but we relate to oh god, I just forgot his name. To Glenn, because he's the only one that's just normal. He's just a guy who's just trying to live his life. Plus zombies.
Right.
I don't think that's normal.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Back.
As close to what normal can be in the context of the Walking Dead universe.
I don't know. I thought always Glenn's character got on my nerves a lot. I know he's a fan favorite, but
and
maybe
the
this is
comics
my
or on the show?
Both. Because zombie apocalypse, I'm not looking for love. That's just not going to be on my to-do list. I'm not going to risk my life to try to find condoms so I can bang my girlfriend. No. But it's just not worth it.
Well, but I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier, N'Jaila, about what the appeal of a story like The Walking Dead is, where it's less about the apocalypse and more about the people, and that how does humanity go on in light of because I think the other thing about The Walking Dead that is intriguing in the beginning, and I think, like as Raymond points to, will probably become tedious, especially after 115 issues in the comic, and I'm sure one day on the television show, the whole notion of like there will never be answers as to like where the apocalypse came from or why, because I think the appeal of a book like World War Z, where it's kind of like it zooms out and tells you about like the aftermath of the apocalypse, and it touches on like where it may have come from, and those are questions I think are intriguing in a zombie story, whereas Walking Dead is really like no one asks about how did this, especially after the first season, where it's no longer about like is this going on other places in the world, is it just us, where did it come from? It's really just about surviving, and part of that I think is getting in touch with your humanity again, and if love and sex is a part of that, of being human.
And N'Jaila, correct me if I'm wrong, but zombies originally weren't necessarily dead, right? Like you could be
No.
It meant mindless. Like the idea of a zombie is someone who is mindless.
It kind of was. Well, zombie is a spirit.
Right.
Like in Trinidadian culture, we have zombie dancers, and they're men on stilts, sometimes women now. And they're like brightly colored, and you're supposed to be like a spirit. But zombies, as they become popular, it's that fear of losing your humanity. And a lot of times, drugged plantation workers were called zombies because they were like these soulless husks who are just working till they die. So that was a fear for a lot of the plantation workers.
Right.
And also there's a lot of like very weird racialized fear in the whole like myth of the zombies. not just from, the Africans that were being brought over, because zombie comes from Obeah, which is kind of like a folk religion that's a different mix of Igbo and other West African people, because during slavery, it wasn't like you could stay with your people. You were
Right.
just an African slave. You were all together. So
You were
took
intentionally
bits and-
not kept with your people.
Exactly. So it took bits and pieces that a lot of these different groups and ethnicities could understand. It kind of became its own thing. And a lot of that fear was, being imprisoned and becoming a slave. And the first zombie movie we have is The White Zombie, which takes this fear that originally was, the colonists come, take me from my land, and then they're going to work me to death and I'm going to lose my humanity, to this fear that the islands are just something sinister about the Caribbean. There's something, evil that's going to take this pure white virgin, take her humanity and sexualize her, and she's going to, be easily manipulated. So there's a lot going on with the zombie thing. So it's always weird for me, as somebody who grew up hearing stories about zombies, to look at zombie culture and just see where they've taken it. The whole premise of the dead comes in. The Bible verses describing Jesus' resurrection talk about the dead walking the earth. And in hoodoo, which is often mistaken for voodoo, though they have kind of a same beginning, they use the Bible as almost like a spell book. So they incorporate it into their own religion. So you find that verse, and they're saying, oh, these spirits who are walking the earth, these zombies were the dead that rose. So it comes from not just the colonial fear of losing yourself to a plantation, but then also the new Christian mythos coming in and integrating with the islanders and their folk religion.
So why do you think current zombie culture has kind of completely, papered over the Caribbean origins of zombie? Like, how did it go from that to what we see now as,
Well, I don't think a lot of people like remembering plantations and slavery and the fact that they worked people to death.
I've got a sequel for 12 Years a Slave.
Well, it's actually very funny, not funny, but interesting that one of the biggest slave rebellions that happened in the Caribbean before the Haitian Rebellion was this Jockey's Rebellion. And after that rebellion was squashed, they banned the practice of Obeah and these folk religions, and voodoo, hoodoo, and all these things became taboo and pejorative. And that is also probably another reason why we don't talk about it, because it's seen as something that empowers the slave population. Because a lot of times these charms are used against slave owners. So you don't want to have a zombie movie where
the modern zombie, pop culture movement. I mean, in my head, again, as someone who's not a connoisseur, and I kind of wish we had someone on the show who was a much bigger zombie film connoisseur than I. To me, it started with like the Night of the Living Dead and George Romero, and it's all kind of what we see now is right. What we see now is a growth of that.
Yeah, but
I'm sure
Romero, he was obviously influenced by the zombie movies of the 30s and the 40s, and he took that and gave it more of a horror edge. Because the first zombie movie was pretty terrible, White Zombie, and
terrible
it kind of
band too, by the way. But anyway.
Also, yeah. I kind of think what people wanted to use it for, they wanted to use the zombie as a device. So doing that, it's kind of like, I guess, creative cultural appropriation. And they, people like Romero and the later zombie directors, filmmakers, kind of use zombies to tell their story without really caring about where this came from, because it didn't matter to them. They got the fear of losing your humanity, but really why that came about didn't matter to their storytelling.
Well, and that takes me back to The Walking Dead, and we were just talking about how, like, Phil and I were saying that the inclusion of a character like Glenn and the casting of an actor like Steve Yeun is kind of an in for us, at least, into eventually zombie horror, and that, because I agree with Phil in that I probably wouldn't have given Walking Dead a chance if I didn't know about Glenn, for example. And not that that's the only reason I watched the show, but that's definitely a big part. But at the same time, the show has gotten, and the comics has gotten kind of mixed bag as far as the way it represents people of color. Like, there are, on the one hand, you have characters like Glenn and Tyrese and Michonne who are, the rare people of color in a comic book. At the same time, there are issues about how those characters are portrayed, and on the television show, this is another point that Jen has brought up on repeatedly on Nerds of Color. On the television show, they've kind of, at least for the first 3 years, and the season premiere has probably been the only exception, where they've had a one black man at a time rule, in which you can only have one black survivor, and when he dies, when you bring in a new one, you have to kill the original. It's like Highlander. But
I kind of always felt like they were being. I was kind of pissed off at the TV show when I first watched it, because they had T-Dog instead of Tyrese, and I was like, what is this? I don't care about this. This is terrible. Like, why would you take this character and replace him with this poor man who never really gets to talk?
There were episodes he never got to talk. Poor T-Dog. He
didn't even get, like,
he was just there to, like,
shots.
be in the background. Yeah.
Well, and then I think the point that Jen makes, Phil, is that I don't know if you've ever been to Atlanta, but Atlanta has a fairly sizable African-American population. Yeah, you don't see either none of the black people survived, or they all survived, because they're not zombies either.
They're all at Magic City and Sin City, and we're just chomping on wings, waiting for this whole zombie thing to blow over.
Because that's the point, right? Like, it's not, you don't even see black zombies in Atlanta, and for those of you who don't watch The Walking Dead, the whole thing is set in Atlanta. So what is, I mean, so the show and comic has kind of a mixed bag in terms of race, doesn't it, Phil?
I mean, I will say this. I understand the point that it doesn't seem very, I mean, within the confines of a zombie show, it doesn't seem very realistic that there aren't a lot of black zombies. Like, there should be a lot more, right? The fact that it's so set in Atlanta. At the same time, I'm not so sure I would be really comfortable with seeing a movie about a bunch of white characters
shooting,
trying to being surrounded and always being attacked by black zombies, like, all the time, right? Like, that would present problematic elements.
Michael Rooker's character would be enjoying it a little way.
Yeah, right. It would be a little.
Well, and that's kind of, I don't know if I'm going to get my zombie video game mixed up, but wasn't there like a Resident Evil or one of those zombie video games that was set in Africa that was the problem, that it was you were a white protagonist shooting black zombies?
Well, I don't think that was the problem. I think the problem with that game was once they got, like, I think it was 5 levels in, when they're like, no, we're going to show, like, Africans and different types of Africans, because in the first level there's black people, there are Southeast Asian zombies, because there is a large population of Southeast Asian people in Africa, and then you get down to that, like, 5th level, and they're like grass skirts and literally chucking spears with the mask. So
what game is it? Was it Resident
Evil 5?
It was Resident Evil. I didn't get it mixed up.
And you had your companion character Sheva, who is supposed to be, the white protagonist equal, but she spends the entire game trying to find a guy that has no interest in her. He doesn't even make eye contact with this girl. And then her second outfit is her in a little jungle bikini with bones for a belt.
So
and she's barefoot, of course.
I think it's fairly well known that video game programmers are not the most ethnically, multiculturally sensitive bunch in any games. I don't think there are many games where people of color are represented in positive portrayals. I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong. Other than like, I don't know, Madden and NBA 2K13, you don't see a lot of characters of color in video games either. At least not portrayed positively. But Raymond, besides the black zombie issue, there is the problem of there aren't many black survivors, at least not on The Walking Dead. And aside from Michonne, who on the show at least has not shown much of a personality. She's a fan favorite in the comics and she's kind of badass, but as a TV character she's been boring. Tyrese finally came on the show last year. And then there are issues about how Tyrese and Michonne are depicted in the comics, but what about the notion that you don't have a lot of characters? Yeah, and we'll talk about that. What about the notion that you don't, about the survivors of color on The Walking Dead are not? There's a mixed bag in the way that the survivors are portrayed.
Well, I mean, in terms of the comic, I've had, I guess, less of a problem in the sense that like the African American characters that show up are a little bit more fleshed out and are actual characters in the comics. Like they they can be strong-willed, they can disagree with Rick, or they can agree with him, but it's not as if that they're just kind of stock characters.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the TV show has been less successful in giving defining traits to the black characters outside of the fact that they're black. I mean, what else is there to say about T-Dog? Like, what are other characteristics that you can say? What are other emotions that guy has that are different from everyone else? There isn't anything. Because they never give him anything to do. And I think that continues to be a recurring problem. So it's this catch-22 of, well, maybe he needs to be a more popular character, but you've got to give him something to do. But he's not a popular character, so you never give him anything to do.
Right. Well, and I think, but they seem to feel going in that direction now. Tyrese seems to have a much larger role this season. They brought in Cuddy's Wire alumni and D'Angelo Barksdale and Larry Gillard Jr. playing a new character who seems to have, at least from the first episode, I don't know a lot about who he's supposed to portray. I don't think he's a character from the comics. I could be wrong about that, but he seems to have a deeper backstory. They've kind of hinted at some darker moments in his past, particularly that he's an alcoholic and things. So do you think that maybe the creators of the show have kind of realized that they've had this problem, and that's why, now, at least in the main cast, we have, Larry Gillard's character, you have Tyrese, you have Sasha and Michonne and then you have Glenn. You have 5 characters of color in prominent roles this season, at least for now. Who knows how many of them are going to get killed before next week? But
I don't know if the producers are coming around to suddenly realizing that, like, oh, we have a diversity problem. I mean 3 of those characters were already established in the comics.
Right.
You know what I mean? They had to at some point introduce them. It's the reason why I watched the show in the first place. Why I was excited they were making it, because I was like, oh, they have to have at least one. Somebody's got to play Glenn. I was excited about that. So
could have been a white guy in makeup.
Yeah, right. It's like
the Walking Dead porn parody did that.
Yeah, that'd be royally screwed up, right?
Yeah.
But
I'm tired.
But so at least they had to dig from the comics to take and adapt it for the show. As for the other characters, the characters who aren't adapted from the comics, Daryl is not, and he's one of the most popular and gets a lot of screen time. I think we'll see with this. The start of this current season is promising. I hope we'll get to see more of all those characters.
Yeah, and I think going back to what Raymond said about just the way they're not good characters. I think that's again going back to Steve's portrayal of Glenn and then the way the arc of Glenn's character. I think what appeals to so many Asian Americans in particular who watch the show is that not only is he like a regular dude, he's one of the few characters who's had like an actual arc over the 4 seasons. Like the character from season 1 is not the same character that you see today, and that's a dynamic thing that we don't get to see usually, right? I mean, that's another appeal to Glenn, right, Phil?
I mean, for sure, and even if you look at the first season, it's like he was so likable, but like he didn't have a whole lot to do. He didn't have a whole lot to do in the first season, and until about the second half of the second season, actually. But from then you've actually really got to see him grow, and because of that, become a big fan favorite. So, you know, when you write good stories for people and you let them grow over time, I think the fans actually will gravitate towards. It's kind of he kind of represents everything you'd like to see in sort of an Asian American character on TV. You know what I mean? Like something we rarely get to see. So I always find that really special.
Yeah, and I mean the guy's become like a sex symbol for a lot of people, and he's one of the few Asian Americans on television who like never wears a shirt either, right? Like that's kind of like in his contract.
Oh, I kind of feel like he got Daniel Day Kim'd from Lost, where his character was supposed to be booted off. He was going to be killed off, and then he took off his shirt, and they realized that women started watching the show.
I'm not gonna lie. I have a friend who was so I interviewed Steven a couple months back for my podcast, and we've talked, and he's a very nice guy. He's very cool. But another friend of mine, knowing that I had interactions with Steven, she is currently binging on The Walking Dead. And then I just get this random text the other day, and she's like, "Hey, how tall is Steven Yeun?" I was like, what a random question. It's like totally out of the blue, and I'm like, oh, he's about my height. Why? You want me to hook it up for you?
Well, I think you said this on your podcast, don't you? Isn't one of the the search items to your blog like Steven Yeun / girlfriend? Isn't that,
yeah. Oh yeah, that's happened a lot a lot actually. It used to be. It's funny because you look at the search terms from the first season to now, and I get a lot of traffic in the beginning from just like it would just be like Chinaman, The Walking Dead. Like, honestly, it'd be like Chink Walking Dead. And people just want to know who that yellow dude. Yeah, the yellow dude on The Walking Dead is. And so, and then over time, you'd see it'd be like Glenn Walking Dead, Steven Yeun girlfriend. The search terms actually.
It kind of mirrors the evolution of the character.
I mean, he became a human being to people. He wasn't just it was humanized. It's like it's what you do. Sort of becoming he became a familiar face, and then he stopped being the Oriental dude on The Walking Dead, and he became Glenn. And that's
And that speaking of mirroring, like I mean that
you guys
that
are making
actually
me feel so bitter. Because you guys are all happy with your representation. I get Michonne, who just gets to be glowery, just pretty much the angry black woman stereotype.
I do feel like she has, at least in this first episode, is showing she's kind of warmed up a little bit, and there's more to her. We'll see. I'm optimistic. I see where you're coming from, though.
Yeah.
I mean, especially the live action portrayal. I mean, I'm not as reversed on Michonne. I just know of her as the badass with the katana, and it's not even a katana, but in the comics. And I don't know. I just felt like ever since she's been on the show, she hasn't been more than just like you said, the glowering, angry black woman. Do you feel her portrayal in the comics is similar, or do you think there's a deeper Michonne in the comics?
She had more to do in the comics, but unfortunately, a lot of her storyline is being sexualized, brutalized, and a lot of gratuitous violence to her naked body. And then I also felt really uncomfortable with how the characterization between her and I forgot the other lady's name, where they were kind of in like that pseudo love triangle, and it just made me feel very uncomfortable the way I kind of feel like they were characterizing her, and it turned me off enough. I haven't really read after that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Do you continue to watch the show though, right? I mean, I know you didn't.
I watch it on and off. Like they put it on Netflix, so me and my brother sat and watched it. But it's not like on my to-do list. I also realized that reading the comic book, when there's gaps, you get to fill those gaps. So I feel like the characters are a lot more likable to me when I was reading the comic than watching the show. Because the first season, I was like, I don't care about any of these people. I hope they all die. Every single one of them annoyed me in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So I think once I started forgetting about the idea I had for some of the characters from the comic and started getting to the characters on screen, I warmed up to them a little.
Yeah. Well, that's the tough part about the comic, Raymond. I know you and I have talked about this in the past, is that, like you said earlier, because it's a comic book, it kind of has to tread water for a long time and not, kind of go in circles. But the problem is that because it's this completely gloomy, no hope, just strife-ridden apocalypse, it's grating as a reader, right? Like it's hard.
But it's more than that. It's the story is, okay, Rick has a group of people. He's gonna save them by taking them somewhere safe. He gets somewhere safe. 2 weeks later, it's not safe anymore, and then they got to go somewhere else. And then they go find another safe place, and then in 2 weeks, that's not safe either. So it's kind of like it's just that same cycle, and it's the same beats over and over again. Not to say that it's not entertaining on a certain level, but because it becomes so predictable after a while, I get less interested in continuing to follow the story.
So it's the repetition. It's not the despair, the overwhelming, like how shitty can we make these characters' lives that gets.
Right. I mean, it's both. Yeah.
Because any story you kind of like, you need a light at the end of the tunnel, right? And
yeah, there's no end game for a Walking Dead.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like at least Lost, it's like, will we ever get off this island? Like that, like. There's that overarching question, and there is no overarching question. It's just like, let's stay alive.
Yeah,
right.
Because they're not gonna end the zombie. Like zombies are just gonna be there, and we're just like I'm hoping that it ends like Shaun of the Dead, and just everyone's happy and playing video games again. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, yeah, or even like World War Z, where like what I found intriguing about the novel. I haven't seen the movie. But it is about the aftermath of the apocalypse, and it's about like how does society rebuild after everything is destroyed. Like the thing about The Walking Dead on the show is that like the other day, the season premiere, that the majority of the episode takes place in a Big Lots, and it was a pretty well stocked. You saw the episode. It was a pretty well stocked Big Lots for an apocalypse that's gone on for at least, I don't know, it's been a year, 2 years maybe. Like it gets to a point where like everything's you're not going to find like well-stocked grocery stores anymore.
You start running out of shit, dude.
So it just doesn't seem like it's kind of like, and Lost, to me it's like how Lost found all of those rations in the Dharma Plaza. Like now everyone's eating all the time on the deserted island. It's just the same thing on The Walking Dead. It's like now that I think that's the point, right? They've established themselves in the prison and everything's hunky-dory, and now everything goes to shit now. But, to that point, I was thinking, like, why are there still Big Lots with lots of stuff in it?
They kind of explained that a little bit. Like, it was overrun with zombies, and so people weren't able to access it.
Yeah, well, and I guess
they cut it out.
Like that's a weird point for the verisimilitude of the story to break. Zombies are all over the place, but this Big Lots is full? No, that's silly.
Well, zombies don't need diapers and baby formula, I guess, so they're not gonna raid those parts of the aisle. Well, so I guess the present question then is, when it comes to zombies and zombie fiction, is what do you prefer? The lumbering zombies of George Romero and The Walking Dead, or running zombies of World War Z and the Dawn of the Dead remake? Which is better, Raymond? Running zombies or slow walking zombies?
I think slow walking zombies are more terrifying because when it's a swarm of them, it's not that they're going to kill you quickly. It's that it's going to happen slowly. If the point of the zombie genre is to accept that you're going to die, and by accepting that you're going to die, figuring out how to live, then I think that the slow death that's coming for you and is at any time is more terrifying. Because if it's just a big fast monster that's going to just kill me really quickly, well, who cares?
It's a well thought out answer to a dumb question. Thank you, Raymond.
Oh, well.
N'Jaila, how about you? Fast zombies or slow zombies?
I kind of feel like neither. I actually, probably because I'm old. not that I'm not scared of zombies. I think like the old school concept of somebody being in control of you and you're this husk of who you were, but you're still semi-conscious. There's still a little piece of you that can be violated, but you have no control over it. That to me is terrifying. And I think that's kind of been lost in the zombie genre. So I think for me, I'm way more afraid of being a zombie than the actual zombies. Because I know I'm slow, I'm fat, I have asthma. I'm dead in the zombie apocalypse. I live in a major metropolitan area. I'm not making it out.
So shoot me in the head first before anything happens.
In the zombie apocalypse, my goal is to just not be alive while I'm being eaten and to hopefully have my body stay intact.
Right. Well,
those are my very lofty goals for the zombie apocalypse.
Well, and I think that's something I've never thought about, is the idea that even after you turn, that you still retain like some part of yourself, and that you're actually aware when you're like decomposing. And I don't know, that is pretty. I can't go to sleep tonight. Thank you, N'Jaila. It was a good idea to do a show at midnight about zombies. How about you, Phil? Fast or slow zombies?
The fast ones, actually. I mean, like I said before, the movie that really freaked me out was 28 Days Later, and those aren't technically zombies. They explained it as a rage virus, right? And but for all intents and purposes, they're putting a realistic spin on a zombie movie, and they were running, and there's a pack of them chasing after you. I think that's pretty scary. So at least for the slow ones, you have some time to like, what am I doing? What do I do?
Right.
But the fast ones are just like, you can get overrun pretty quick. And also the idea of being somewhat, like, we haven't really thought about the state of what it's like to be a zombie. But the other night, Steven Yeun was actually on Conan, and he said, like, in the zombie apocalypse, he would just opt to get bitten and become a zombie, because it's like, we don't know what the zombies are like. What if being a zombie means it's like you're in a constant state of ecstasy? Like they're always moaning, like, maybe it's because they're constantly orgasming, and then like, and maybe like the taste of flesh when you become a zombie all of a sudden it's just delicious, and so it's like the best thing you've ever eaten. So, but no one. Chicken. But once you cross over, you have no way of telling, communicating that information, and so maybe being a zombie is really amazing.
That makes me feel better now. So, and the terror that N'Jaila left me with is gone, and now I feel good.
So if I was bitten in the zombie apocalypse, I would make sure I bit almost all of my friends, because I'm not going out alone.
It's like a party altogether, Who knows? Maybe.
Well, yeah, because the zombies never attack each other, right?
Yeah, maybe they're having a big ass party.
They're always just hanging out, sleeping in diners until someone opens the door, and they're like,
that's chilling.
That's a good point. All right, let's all get bitten by zombies when the apocalypse comes.
We're making a pact right now.
There you go.
Everyone.
blood pact.
Yeah.
Like, well, it's the other.
Yeah, because you and Marilyn and him and Callie just like, let me get over there to bite you.
We'll make it. Once I'm bitten, no one's gonna shoot. See, because that's the other unrealistic thing about The Walking Dead, is that no one is that great a shot with a gun, right? Like you can't. Police will tell you can't take perfect headshots, like one after the other like that. So I have a pretty good idea that I'll make it all the way to.
Those guns like never jam, and they keep firing them. So unrealistic.
No, I mean they literally, like, they're the perfect headshots from like 20 feet away, without fail. That's pretty unrealistic. Although we joked last time when we talked about Breaking Bad that that's kind of a hidden critique of the American healthcare system. But I don't know. Maybe The Walking Dead is like a secret NRA kind of a pro Second Amendment show. Is that possible?
No, actually, because they always say. I mean, like, people have guns, but they always say it's not your preferred choice when fighting zombies because they make too much noise.
It's too loud. That's true.
Yeah, and it seems like they're really making a case for crossbows, actually. So
that's true.
The National Crossbow Association should really be making like a case for the show. Yeah.
When I become a zombie, I hope I get crossbowed if I'm gonna get taken out.
Well,
but,
you know, I mean,
but isn't there the lingering fear that even after you're killed and immobile, you're still alive? Wasn't that you continue to maintain your consciousness even though you can no longer do anything? I thought that was the true dread of being a zombie.
It
Right,
is.
yeah, well, you know, but back to that idea though, I think that's what made the pilot episode in the first issue of The Walking Dead so poignant, like the bicycle girl zombie, right? Like where she's got no legs and she's just crawling, and I mean, you know, Rick puts her out of her misery at the end of the episode, and that's kind of like a, you know, at that point he still, you know, he doesn't know what's going on. He thinks that I am putting her out of her misery, but that is kind of the terrifying idea that you are forever just based on instinct, and you're just trying to eat, and you're just crawling to whatever, and you're no longer, like, you know, Raymond asks a question like, is it about, you know, pleasure or is it about free will? Because I know you weren't being serious about, you know, it might be awesome to be a zombie, but it also means that you're completely, you know, slave to instinct, and you can no longer, you know, have companionship, or you can no longer choose what you want to do.
That's terrible. Slaves on the plantation.
Yeah,
and with that
yeah, exactly. That's I mean, that's the point for me, is that like, if the larger metaphor is that, you know, you can make the argument that like the things that we do to feel good aren't necessarily the things that we do to be alive, right? There's a difference between pleasure and the right. I'm sorry, I'm breaking out the Kierkegaard.
Well, on that happy note, I want to thank my guests, Raymond Chow, Phil Yu, and N'Jaila Rhee, for terrifying my night's sleep tonight. Thank you at home for watching Hard N.O.C Life, and I'll see you next week.
Peace.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard Knock Life, comics, movies, and TV, yo. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard Knock Life, but not the chica kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share the interest together with a similar kind. When they said Don Glover for Spider-Man, they didn't mind. The activists, directors, comments, and the lectures. Fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC in full color, you see me? The